Hello investors, this is Stuart Cruz and welcome to Cruz Asset Management's Chart of the Day. And today we're going to be talking about consumer sentiment. Consumer sentiment is a measure of how good the consumers feel about the marketplace, and that's important in the United States because 2/3 of our economy is driven on the purchasing of the consumer. We are a consumer-based economy. So if the consumer sentiment is down, that's not good for our economic future, basically. So what I have on the chart here is a 3-year chart of consumer sentiment. And you can see I have an average number put up here. Let me go to my originals. I have an average number put up here. And it says our long-term average of 3 years is around 93%. Now, looks like it traded more in the 95 range until we had these sell-offs or this drop-off in consumer sentiment back in April when we had the lockdown. And that makes sense. So consumers weren't feeling that great about going out and spending money or about the economy, and they haven't felt very good for a while. I'm going to switch this to a 5-year chart now because you can still see an average consumer sentiment being around 93.5, and we're down at 72. So we haven't seen these numbers for a while. 10-year is more like an 86 average, and the long-term average is, again, 86. Now you can see these gray bands that I'm showing you are recessions. And so right now we're in a recession, so you see the consumer sentiment fall off. And normally in recessions, you see consumer sentiment fall off. So, although not always, but mostly you see it fall off down into the 60s range, and we're at 72. So long-term average, going back, we'll call it 70 years, is a consumer sentiment number of around 86, and we're about 15% below that. But not nearly as low as we typically get during most recessions. Now, why is that? Well, technology, again, because technology has really gotten a shot in the arm due to the lockdown as people have really converted to using technology, which has benefited companies like Apple and Facebook and Google and Zoom and Nvidia and a lot of these tech companies. But there is a tale of two economies because not only do you have this economic boom going on, but you have high levels of unemployment and relatively low levels of consumer sentiment. So in the future, some of these consumer companies may not do as well. That said, we've really had some good retail numbers. Now, I'm going to take this back to a 10-year chart, and I'm going to talk about what the future might be for the stock market, because really what we care about is where's the stock market going. And if I were to look at the levels of the stock market right now, based off the PE ratio of the S&P 500, and I'm going to add this to this chart and change it to a percentage change, what we notice right away is the PE ratio is very closely mirrored to consumer sentiment numbers, and that makes sense. So as consumers feel better about things, they're willing to pay more for a dollar of earnings because they believe their future is going to be better in the economy. But if the sentiment drops off, then they're not going to feel as great about the future prospects of the economy, and that could mean a PE contraction for the economy. So right now we see a high level of PE expansion, kind of a pullback, but it's been following this number right here. But now we see a big downturn in consumer sentiment, and maybe that has yet to work its way into the economy. So we need to really stay tuned because you could very easily get some PE contraction because these long-term PEs are relatively high. And if you got a PE contraction of 10 or 15%, which would kind of bring you back to the average numbers, you could see the market fall by 10 or 15%, if only for one reason, because of consumer sentiment. Okay, so we're going to keep an eye on the ball, keep an eye on the statistics and the stats, and keep making decisions so that we put the odds in your favor.